Hey there, thanks for tuning in to Adventure Story number 5 from Ranch Bookings. For those of you who don't already know, the Adventure Story series is a series from Ranch Bookings where we interview industry experts as well as resort owners to talk about their best practices, advice, and stories. And here in Adventure Story number 5, it was another great one. We interviewed Russell True. Now, we did have some issues with the video, so we just had the audio, so I highly recommend hitting play and putting it on in the background. So before we dive right into that, one last bit of housekeeping. If you're interested in being involved with the Adventure Story series, you want to be interviewed, or you know somebody we should interview, please send me an email, give me a call, or likewise if you're interested in ranch bookings. So now that I got that out of the way, please enjoy our interview with Russell True. All right. Hey, thanks for joining us for Adventure Story 5. We're here today with Russell True, the owner of White Stallion, Tombstone, and Rancho de la Osa. Russell, thank you very much for joining us today. Matt and I were really excited to chat with you. We know you have a lot of really wonderful information and advice to share. But before we start talking about marketing and all that great stuff about ranches, I'd love to ask, how did you get started? How did your family get started in the guest ranch industry?
Well, I always sort of jokingly say my biggest decision was picking my parents well, because that's how I got started. I essentially grew up here. My parents were Rocky Mountain people. My mother had lived her entire life in Denver, where they were living at the time, and my dad was born in Wyoming, raised in Montana. And while it's beautiful and they certainly got that up there, they were looking for warmer weather, and they'd been cold long enough. And as my dad told the story, for the rest of his life, he came home to what was going to be his last blizzard there in Denver, and he said that was it. He traveled a lot in his business, and so he just turned around, got back on a plane, flew to Tucson, and they'd already sort of scouted Tucson as where they wanted to go. They just liked the weather, of course, and they liked the size of it, and they just the culture was a little different than Phoenix, so they wanted to live in Tucson. So the next day, my dad's now here in Tucson. He starts looking around for something to do, and he knew he had to reinvent himself, because the business he was in Denver, and had been his whole life, doesn't exist in Tucson. So he looked at apartments and trade schools, and among all the different things that were on the list were 4 dude ranches in the Tucson area. There were 24 for sale. 24 in all. 4 were for sale. Tucson was once the dude ranch capital of the world, with over 130 dude ranches. And so anyway, there were 24. 4 were for sale. He looked at all 4. Of the 4, White Stallion was the least well known, probably the most run down, and yet my dad correctly identified, he felt, and he was right, it had the most long-term potential. The rest are no longer dude ranches, or just completely gone at this point. And so he comes back, gets my mother, and my mother was the more pragmatic of the two, so he brings her down. We stay as guests for a week. I was 5, and so I got to be a guest at the dude ranch, and at the end of the week, my mother said, Alan, this is the worst idea you've ever had. We're not qualified, prepared to do this. You were a wrangler when you were 12 for 3 months in Glacier Park. That doesn't make you a cowboy. And we're in over our head here. And so my dad, he was a good talker, so he had to get her back through that same journey he'd been on with the trade schools and the restaurants, and probably all better businesses, but all dull. And so at the end of that journey, my mother finally said, well, Alan, and she told the story about herself for the rest of her life. She said, well, Alan, if I can look at those mountains every morning when I wake up, I'll let you throw our lives away. And so my dad said, we have a deal. And so I'm sitting in the office where my mother typed on her manual typewriter for the rest of her life, never touched a computer, and looking out those same floor-to-ceiling glass windows that my dad built across the entire south wall of their house to accommodate my mother's desire to look at the Tucson Mountains, Safford, and Panther Peak. So I'm still here 55 years later doing essentially what they did then, and that's just, I guess, serendipity, or however you want to, fate. However you look at life, that's how I'm here.
That's what a wonderful story, and for your mother to take that bet, and that what a bet coming to full fulfillment right there. Being able to look, 55 years later, you're still looking out those same windows. Wow.
Yep.
So what was it like for you? How old were you when you first got to? Because you didn't have any experience with ranching or horses or anything like that before then, did you?
No, I lived kind of, I guess it would be considered now suburban lifestyle in Denver, Colorado. I mean, it's now really in the city where we lived, and so no, I didn't have any ranch experience. I was only 5 when they bought the ranch. They opened the ranch in September, or bought the ranch in September, opened it in October. It was an October through April business, like most dude ranches in southern Arizona at the time, and so there wasn't a house, so my dad had to build that house that I'm sitting in, and so we moved down when I was 6 in March, and we got here before our clothes and possessions, so all we had were our suitcases, 3 cots, and a crib, and we moved into our brand new house, and in our parents' bedroom, they had placed the 3 cots and a crib, so that's where we spent our first night, and we're wakened the first morning at 6:30 by the maintenance man yelling outside my parents' private patio window, "Hey, Mr. True, come out here." So my dad slides open the slider, and I kind of follow him out, and there's the maintenance man waving a steak knife, and he said, "Mr. True," and he was obviously drunk, even to a 6-year-old, and he said at 6:30 in the morning, he said, "You've been a great boss for these 3 weeks I've worked for you, so I'm here to tell you that I'm headed to the kitchen now to kill Louise the cook, and when I'm finished with her, I'm going to kill Lyndon Johnson, our president."
What?
So my dad, he was a funny guy. He was a quick thinker. He had a dry wit, and he hated Lyndon Johnson. And so without hesitating, he said, "Well, I can't have you hurt Louise, but I'll buy you a ticket to Washington." And
Sorry.
So the guy was kind of confused. He really wasn't looking for help. He was just drunk and angry. So that kind of took him off his game for a moment. My dad jumped the wall, grabbed the knife, grabbed the guy, and said, "Okay, buddy, you're out of here." And so he drove him to town, and that was truly and absolutely our first day as a family in the business here at White Stallion.
Wow. Talk about setting the bar high first night in.
we were given fair warning.
Oh, that's great. So, how long was White Stallion, just White Stallion, before you started acquiring other ranches? Did you grow up just at White Stallion, and were the other ranches acquisitions later on in life?
Right. Yes. So, again, we've been here 55 years, came in 65. We bought Tombstone coming up 6 years ago out of a foreclosure. It was just one of those weird things. It's a long story, but the short version is some folks had taken it back in a foreclosure. They were wise, not young business people who didn't want to own a dude ranch. And so they got my name somehow and said, "Come, please buy this thing." And I'd done an inspection on it, so I knew the ranch, and for the Dude Ranchers Association, I'd done an inspection. So I'd looked under the beds and looked in the tack room and knew exactly what they were doing down there. And I really liked the ranch. And so we put together a couple of partners. My brother didn't want to expand out beyond White Stallion, so he's my partner here at White Stallion. He does some other things. And we got a couple of partners and bought the ranch in Tombstone. And then De La Osa, about 3.5 years ago, we bought it out of an auction. And it wasn't an auction because the owners weren't desperate money-wise. They were just tired, and they were ready to sell, and it was just a way to take it to the end in a defined way. So, and we were good friends, and as it worked out, we were the only folks that were going to buy it and save it as a dude ranch, and so we put together a couple of different partners and bought that ranch. So we operate all three, and we also we don't own any of it, but we help market and do reservations and some general management of Kale Bar on the historic ranch outside Wickenburg. But we're not partners in that ranch. We're just management partners, and it's really fit in well with us. So we're involved in 4 Arizona dude ranches.
Did you always have an idea, maybe, or an inkling in the back of your mind that you wanted to expand or go outside of just White Stallion, outside of the family ranch, to expand that? Or was that just kind of right time, right moment, you know?
I wouldn't, as a kid, and as, you're a kid, I'm running around riding horses and motorcycles and hiking and going places I had no business being, and I was raised in a different culture. So my parents, frankly, if I'd ever gotten killed, they wouldn't have found my body for weeks because they wouldn't have known even where to look. So, I mean, literally. So, I was out and around enjoying it as a kid, and as I began to get a little older, high school and college, the ranch here, White Stallion, was struggling, and stagflation there in the 70s, and that was a rough time. I think people who didn't live through it don't really recognize the economic malaise, as to use Carter's word. So it was tough times. The ranch was struggling. We took on debt we'd never had, and so my focus when I came out of college in 1982 was really to, even though I thought I was really kind of tilting my windmills, was to really help my parents, my dad didn't have great health, and so really help them get this ranch back where it was really self-sustaining and doing well. And I don't know if I was that optimistic, but we did it. And my brother came out of college a few years after, and nothing like an owner to work cheap and long. And so yeah. We did, and we got rid of all the debt, and we got White Stallion to a position. It took a really long time, and I told a great friend of mine in Montana, Zach Worth, at his ranch, I said, it took us 45 years to get us the ranch we wanted. And he always laughs about that, but it's true. And so it was a long, steady journey. Once we got out of debt, we never borrowed another dollar. And so it wasn't until we really found stability and success here that I could think about doing something else. And we bought a little cow ranch outside Williams, Arizona, which is 30 miles west of Flagstaff, with the idea of doing a summer ranch up there, and we thought that was a real good mix. And we still have it. We just never, there's a lot of infrastructure to create, and so we never got there. We still own the ranch, but the Tombstone thing it was just sort of there, and
it just kind of happened.
It was a new built on an historic 140-year-old, one of Tombstone's original cattle ranches, and so they built this purpose-built dude ranch on that. And it's Tombstone, Arizona, the west's most iconic town. They did things really well. They just didn't know how to market, so they lost the ranch, and it just seemed like an opportunity.
The right opportunity. Yeah, absolutely. So I want to step one step back, because this is a great segue now. You're coming out of college, you're going back to your parents' business. Like you said, your father wasn't in necessarily the best health. You wanted to get that ranch where it was self-sustaining and back on its feet. The question that I'm kind of going to hint around here is that generational transfer. That a lot of these ranch businesses are multi, first, second, third generation family businesses, and I want to say, for anybody who's listening, don't quote me on these numbers, but I believe a statistic I read, it was like 70% of second and third generation family businesses fail. So you're the second generation. Stephen graduated from Statler, which is, the best hotel business school in the country. What does, not your succession plan, but how has that experience and process been for you, having grown up on the ranch, having taken it over from your father, and now as you're expanding, you're giving more responsibilities to your son? What can you speak about what that's been like?
Sure. I think, you know, first of all, I'll just speak in general about the family business, and you
Please.
know, it's funny over the years, other dude ranches who knew of us or whatever they knew, and my brother and I took over steadily and from our parents, and my mother's health deteriorated somewhat at the end of her life, and my dad's been gone a long, long time. So, um, the for us, the transition was, you know, slow and steady, and other family dude ranches, most dude ranches are family run. Some of them would call us and they'd say, you know, I just can't get along with my brother or my sister-in-law or my uncle, or, you know, how do you guys do it? And so my answer back then, I haven't had one of those calls in a long time, even though we still get along, um, was that even though it wasn't logical, we separated our responsibilities, and then we respected that separation of responsibilities. So, and at White Sand, I ran the corrals. So my brother maybe doesn't like how I run the corrals. I don't know. He doesn't tell me because we run the corrals. You know, he does transportation, maintenance, and lots of other things. I'm just giving you some examples. I don't get involved in that. If it's a big decision, we're going to build a new room or do a renovation or do something or not do something, we have a meeting and we determine it, and the negative, the veto, controls. So if somebody says, "No, I don't think we should do that," that's you
That's
know,
it.
we stick with status quo and go on. What I realize now is we have multiple ranches, and a great friend and partner of mine, Jay Wells, said to me when we first got involved in Tombstone, he helps me run that. He said, as long as we always stick with one rule, the ranch is the boss, we'll always be fine. And he says that applies to whatever. You know, if we were manufacturing something, you know, making pillows is the boss. And so his whole point is, you know, we don't make decisions for Russell. We don't make decisions for my brother Michael. We don't make decisions for the employees. We don't make decisions for our kids. We make decisions for the ranch. I now understand. And we were doing it back then. As long as we keep that first and foremost, then our employees will be taken care of. They'll have jobs. My son will be taken care of because he'll have a thriving business to take over, and we'll be well off because we'll exit out of a successful business if that's what happens. So that's, first of all, the family business aspect, and I think it's really important, and once I understood why we were successful more even than when I was asked in the old days, it made a much clearer vision for me. My son, one time I was sitting with guests in the dining room, and guests said, "Oh, you must be excited your son wants to go to hotel school." And I said, "Well, I didn't know I have two sons." I said, "Which son?" They said, "Stephen." He said he heard you say that if you had to do over again, you'd have gone to hotel school, and that you went to business school. I have a finance degree, and that you had to learn a lot of hard lessons, and they were expensive, and they took too long, and you delayed progress. And that is true. That's 100% true. I did. And because I thought I knew all about running a dude ranch. Well, actually, I knew a lot less than I thought I knew. So I had to learn a lot of lessons the hard way. And I learned a lot of lessons from my association through the Dude Ranchers Association, and being around some really terrific dude ranchers who were older than me and were kind enough to tell me things. But that was a long, painful, expensive process. It is a shortcut, not a complete shortcut, but it is a shortcut to go to hotel school. And I wish I had, because first and foremost, we run hotels. We don't think we do, but we do. And so they said, "Oh, he's going to go to hotel school." So I went to Steve and I said, "Is this true?" He said, "Yeah, I want to go to hotel school." I said, "Well, the best is Cornell." And once he went and saw it and he realized he could play some polo and do some stuff, then he became quite anxious to go. He thrived. He came back. But you know what? In the big picture, he learned a lot of theory, and he was around a lot of interesting, engaging, inspirational people, both in terms of his friends and his professors. But he came back with the idea that we know what we're doing here. There's always ways to polish the wheel, as we say here at White Stang, because ours is pretty round by now. But he didn't come in with a bunch of new ideas or arrogance from an Ivy League education. Instead, he came back with a lot of enthusiasm and felt like school kind of confirmed what we do here.
That's got to be a pretty good feeling to have your son come back and say that, looking at everything.
Well, it does, and he worked at a couple of really great dude ranches, one before college and one after. He worked at Paradise in Wyoming, and he worked at Triple Creek in Montana, which is a world-renowned. So he worked at really two very top ranches and got that great experience, and that's always important. And then in the middle of that, he got that world-class, best in its area education, and so it's terrific. But and we may talk about the virus of insanity later, but right now the bulk of our crew are furloughed. Instead of 100 guests, we have 10. Yep. And Stephen and his wife Alice are, they're. I'm back to my roots. I'm shoeing horses, washing dishes, cooking breakfast, but they're doing everything too, and they're just stepping up and steadily. Stephen is and long before the virus thing, guests and staff too are looking at him more and more as a general manager, and we're not a title culture here. We don't do that. I don't have a title. He doesn't have a title. If you have a job,
if you don't need one,
But people are increasingly looking at him that way. He's got a very calm and controlled demeanor that clearly knows his business, not above doing any job. And so it's happening without any plan in our part. It's just those who work for us and those who stay with us as guests are increasingly seeing him as that. And I'm not even that old, but I'm not young, but clearly they're seeing that, and so it's interesting. It really grabs you because it's pretty all-consuming, and there are easier and better ways to make a living if money's the primary motivator.
Is that something you see out of general curiosity often in the ranch owners, but do you see, generally I would say we probably see more people who are in it for the lifestyle because they love it, because this is what they want to do? Do you still run across many people who you kind of walk away from thinking like they might be in this for the wrong reasons?
I think most people get in it unless they really are up to speed, either as guests who really immerse themselves in the experience and understood the other side, or somebody who worked in the business, and it's just not normally how people buy dude ranches. It seems to be a lark. It's either people like my parents who came A, to Tucson, and B, looked at dude ranches and had no preconceived idea, no history that suggests that they should do it. Or people who just sort of blunder into a dude ranch for sale, or they were guests. And so of those people, including my parents' type demographic, most of those people are not going to stay very long in the business. They're usually going to be out in the sort of conventional wisdom is 10 years or less. And I would say that's usually true. It really does have to grab you. Generational people. I rode the school bus. I was one of 5 dude ranch families rode the school bus, and I'm the only one who even got close to staying. So it's a challenge in that regard. You see the generational ones like Eaton's and things like that. That's just a whole different story.
Yeah. Well, so this is another great segue into, you have so many, obviously you're working with three ranches, you have a number of beds to keep filled. Marketing is well in your wheelhouse. I'm wondering what kind of differences you see, or that you wouldn't mind talking about, between the larger ranches and the smaller ranches, maybe different marketing approaches. And with that, what advice you would have as far as marketing is concerned for these ranches. And we can talk a little bit about the COVID-19 stuff. The framework around that question is, eventually the economy is going to open back up. Ideally, people are going to then be booking vacations. They're probably, hopefully, going to be staying away from cruises and Disney's. So ranches could potentially be in a great position um, to rebound when all this gets over. What are your thoughts, and do you have any advice on that?
Well, let me answer in general. So I'm going to pretend for a minute we're talking 6 weeks ago before this happened.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And so let's be pre-COVID for a moment, and I'll say that overall, dude ranches, in my opinion, and I'm involved in some pretty small ranches and one that's on the big side, not nearly as big as a few, but certainly in the top 10 or 15 size-wise, White Stallion. So I have a little bit of, I can't speak from experience for a Tanque Verde or Rancho de los Caballeros or something like that are bigger, but even those size ranches in hospitality are relatively small businesses. And other than us that have some more than one ranch, most ranches are independent operations that don't have that aren't franchises and don't operate in any way that's similar to franchises. They work through associations, etc., but mostly they work on their own. So I believe that within the budget constraints of a small ranch versus, say, a bigger ranch like White Stallion, the marketing is roughly the same. You have to, and we don't market, for instance, the four ranches that we're involved in the same, because each of them, either because of its area or because of the way it's designed or because of proximity to things or not proximity to things. Rancho de los is near a town of 11 people called Sassabee. It's an hour and 15 minutes, an hour from Tucson. So if you're getting an OTA, say Expedia search, they're not going to come up in Tucson. And so OTA type supplemental business, Expedia,
Yeah.
Booking.com, et cetera, that really doesn't play there, because they'd have to really look for where you are, which means they know you're there.
Yeah.
So Tombstone, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. Because of its proximity to a well-known, iconic Western town, the OTA stuff works. Still, that's not our fundamental business. But when you're trying to save failed dude ranches, you're pretty open to do whatever you can to get people through the doors and bridge the gap until hopefully you're filled with regular conventional dude ranch guests, which is what we all want. So I think marketing is area specific, it's ranch specific. Are you a cattle ranch? Are you an upscale ranch? Do you have a lot of activities? White Stallion, we went really activity rich, trying to expand our pool of interested guests a little bit. It seemed to really work. Are you going on the history? Are you going? So you market, and the great advantage that dude ranches have today, which is the advantage everybody obviously has, is the internet. And so in the past, you had to get a brochure in somebody's hand or a cooperative publication into somebody's hand, or have some word of mouth going on. And that's a very, very slow growth way to do business, and referrals. So with the internet now, if you're good at it and you're engaged, including social media and all that sort of thing, you have a much shorter lead time. If you want to offer something, you can offer it today. We change things. So dude ranches, in my opinion, they need to market beside their own individual whatever uniqueness they have. And whatever market they find, like De La Osa, I'm going to digress for a minute. We found a lot of groups love to go there because they can book the whole thing, and there's certain isolation, and they get really focused and all this stuff. So we were surprised. We got a lot more group business than we expected. But so internet, your website needs to be good, your social media needs to be good. Unfortunately, you probably need to do Google AdWords. It pains me. I think it's a corrupt system, and we're being pushed that way, but it works. It just absolutely works. So internet, whatever facet is available to you should be taken advantage of.
Well, so staying in the vein right there, if I can jump in here just for a second and throw in one more question with this, in the vein of internet and, like you said, working with OTAs, one of the important things that we've heard before from some of our adventure stories is that ranches need to make sure they have the right tools. And that means, and I'd like to get your thoughts on, I know number of ranchers don't like online booking. That's the bad word. You never say it, or you stay as far away from it. But what are your opinions on those ranches who maybe still, you go to their website and you hit book now and it says email or fill out this form to find out more information? Do you think ranches need to start putting themselves, at least from a technology and tool standpoint, to be able to capture these folks? Or do you think as long as they have an internet presence, they can still take calls over the phone and take bookings the normal way?
So I'm going to, first of all, I want to address, no, I can answer that perfectly well. So I want to answer OTAs really quickly. OTAs are probably, for no ranch, it does produce fairly well at Tombstone, and I really look forward to the day I don't need them, because they're not really doing what we want to do. Now, do we get full package regular guests? Absolutely. So unfortunately, we can like it or not like it, they are a reference point for a very high percentage of travelers. So I don't argue a dude ranch that says they don't want to be there. I understand it, and we could go through all the specifics, and I get it. But if you're not as full as you want to be, then you probably should be on there. If you need to fill some this and that, or just ratchet up your exposure a little bit, and you can handle the logistics, because there are some, you should be there. Now let's talk about the far more important question of not being able to book online on the website, which actually ties in with the OTA, because as my brother says, he goes to an OTA as a reference point, and then he goes to the direct site and books 99.9% of the time on the direct site.
Same.
So that does happen a lot. So they're advertising for you, and if they don't book the trip, you pay nothing. Okay, forget them. OTAs will take off the table for a minute. I know a lot of dude ranchers, ones I respect and like, and I think they're smarter than me, but they're wrong when they say you can't book online. And my answer to them is this. They say, well, I have to explain all the peculiarities and the special things about my ranch and make sure they're the right guest. And because if they're not the right guest, it's going to be bad for me, bad for them, bad for everybody. And I get that. I 100% agree with that. There's nothing worse than a guest who doesn't belong on your ranch because they expected something else. We don't want that. None of us want that. None of us are greedy or desperate enough to want that, because it's in the long term bad. What they forget are two things. A, if you have a website today, 99% chance that website will have informed your guests more about your ranch than any 1 hour phone call you could ever have. So they didn't even call you unless your website is indicating that you're in the realm of the vacation that they want. So first of all, they're self-excluding themselves. If they want a resort dude range, they're not going to De La Osa. If they want more resorty, they're coming to White Stein, or at least they're putting us on the list with, say, Tanque Verde and De Los Cap. So now let's say, well, I need to establish the differences and talk to them about all these things. My next question to them is, have you done an email exchange back and forth? Maybe their time, or maybe they're foreign, maybe their timing is not your timing. And so they say, do you have a pool? Is it heated? Yes, we have a pool and it's heated and there's a hot tub and it's like this. Do you do like 10 emails back and forth? And then they say, okay, I'll book the date, and they book it. Well, yeah, that happens. I said, that's inconvenient. You're making it harder for people to do what they want to do, but you don't think they can do by not allowing them to book online. We book online here. Still a majority of our guests call. We don't find any more success or failure with the guests who book online than the guests who don't. Meaning the fit is the same. Some people come here, they shouldn't have come. Okay, we'll help them find another place. My wife, who's much younger than me, says she will not call a property. No, she's not talking about dude ranging. She goes, they don't even know what they're talking about. I'd rather do it online.
Yep.
So it's a big mistake. I completely understand why they do it, but they're wrong.
Well, I think that I mean, obviously, with ranch bookings, I clearly agree with you, but that's again clearly a biased point of view. But I think that's the hard truths that I think a number of people need to hear, especially as, like you said, your wife, as she's booking a trip for you guys or looking at any of these properties. My wife is the same, where I'll look at the website. I don't necessarily want to call. I can do a lot of research on my own. I don't necessarily, when I want to call you, I'll pick up the phone or I'll send you an email, but I like to be able to do it on my own.
Yep. And increasingly, my wife's 36. That age bracket is not going to call you. And if they do, great, we got the phone, we'll answer it. And still the majority of our bookings are following a phone call. So I'm not saying don't do phone calls, but our business is built around a lot of incremental sources, which is frankly our preference, that add up to a fairly successful dude ranch. And we're not so fat and rich that we can say, well, we just don't need online bookings. They're 15-20% of our business, and that's a big chunk. And how many of them would have called us or just gone to somebody else that has an online booking?
Yeah, and you don't know. And well, this again works out well. I'm going to circle back to the marketing aspect, because once you are able to have that full online booking process, and it's not, we've already kicked a dead horse over there, but you're actually able to see the metrics and the data, the analytics of your customers' booking process. Okay, they came from here onto your website. Okay, now they went from your website into your booking funnel, and you can actually understand that whole cycle. Where did they leave? Did they leave an empty cart? Now you can take your marketing efforts and retarget them to try to bring them back to your ranch. But if you don't offer any kind of online availability or online booking, you're missing a whole section of your sales funnel.
Yeah, and I didn't know that, and that is something we've actually been a little late to the game learning, and what you just said is 100% true. And we got some data that was pretty shocking to us. I mean, not in a bad way. It wasn't what we expected, and so it changed some specific marketing. Well, specifically, the Google AdWords worked at a rate that we had no expectation of, quite honestly. And it
Yep.
it seems that they work better than organic, which is, both disappointing but important to know, and so it shifted our thinking. And so I agree 100%. And maybe that's a little different market than the person gets on the phone, but I doubt it. They're probably doing the same thing one way or the other.
Yeah, I definitely think they're mirroring pretty close. And
Yep.
this just goes
Yep.
back, and I'm sure Matt's going to listen to this conversation, and he's going to be throwing his arms up in the air because I will say Matt Carand, for anybody who's listening, Matt Chu has been talking about this for 3 or 4 years as he's been building this product, because obviously he grew up on a ranch and uniquely understands the processes and how things work. So it's really reaffirming to hear you say that is the right approach.
Yep.
So I'm going to circle in. I know we're kind of coming around here to our hour. The last two things I really wanted to hit on, I think this has just been a great phone call. There's been a lot of great advice here. The marketing, the analytics around marketing, the backstory. But now you're also working with the Silver Spur Alliance and Yonder. So
Right.
I'd love for you to elaborate a little bit more on both of those. We can start with the Silver Spur Alliance, and we can talk about Yonder as well. But I think both the Silver Spur Alliance and Yonder seem to be spearheading something unique for the guest ranch industry.
So as I've done already, and I spoke too much, I know, but I'd like to answer a question in more
Please
the.
do.
I'm kind of a big picture person, and then I'll bring it back to Spur Alliance and Yonder, and we were talking about marketing, and I gave my preliminary answer. The other two things that I think are absolutely critical to little dude ranches, which we all are. None of us are big. I mean, really, is get involved in your associations. So that means if you're in the West, you're in the DRA, you get yourself compliant and be a member. And if you have a state association, join it. And get to know your other ranchers. When they get to know your ranch, they're going to refer you. They're going to show you things that you'd never thought of. We've learned so much from Tanque Verde Ranch over the years that they probably should charge us money for this stuff. And the associations have tremendous value, both in terms of internal education, internal referral, and marketing. They're the number one source of DRA for us in terms of just straight out referrals in, other than word of mouth and repeat, which is its own animal. And then PR. And PR can be work, whether it's a TV show that really isn't about you, but it's being filmed on your ranch, and sometimes they don't pay you, sometimes they pay you a little, sometimes you get freelance writers, and a lot of ranches talk like, well, I'm not doing it unless they're, well, the best person that's ever come to us is Mark Bedore, and he's a freelance writer, TV producer, and he comes almost always without an assignment, always gets it placed. He's a great guy, and he's a great advocate for ranching, but he's a freelancer. So PR. Say yes to everything that you can pull off. If you can't pull it off, don't do it. And if it's demeaning or exploitive, don't do it. But otherwise, do it, because you never know what it'll lead to. And we don't have the budgets, none of us, to really affect the marketplace in advertising. We cannot advertise other than Google AdWords and stuff like that. Okay, so Yonder and Spur Alliance. So Spur Alliance, now called BestDudeRanches.com, was a collection of 10 ranches Tyler Beckley put together, of ranches that had, and I hate the word, but I'm going to use it because it applies here, progressive attitudes toward, not political progressive, but progressive in terms of being more open-minded, more cutting edge, ways to market, do PR, and get their ranch's words out. And also he was very specific in creating a group that was of typically generational, but at least family ownership, where there was a real connection to the ranch. You know, the Australians say there's nothing fertilizes the soil like the footsteps of its owner. So Tyler's vision was very much about owners and families and that. So Colleen, recently retired executive director of Dude Ranchers Association's taken it over. Tyler's busy with his ranch, and so we're going to expand it a little in numbers as we find ranches that fit both our mission and our criteria. That'll be Colleen's job. When I say ours, that's not my job. But I don't want that job. But, you know, they're like-minded people. I'm always proud and inspired to be around those folks, those other ranches. And so we're not trying to be exclusive. We have like minds, and some of us are a little more marketing oriented than some other ranches, and so we work well together and we get the word out, and I think, you know, we kind of see ourselves as a subset of the DRA. We're 100% supportive of that, and it just allows us to do some things that fit our mindsets a little more closely. Yonder, I think. Thank you. I think Yonder is probably you know, this whole crisis lately is
throwing a wrench in everything.
Set you on your heels.
Yep.
Yonder is probably my biggest light at the end of the tunnel. And you know, my uncle always said, the harder I work, the luckier I get, and we all have to have luck to find success, period. And maybe Yonder's getting a little lucky because their very heartfelt mission was to get the traveling public from the world out into nature because they think it's restorative. It replaces pharmaceuticals. It just is healing, and they believe
there's a lot of good to it. Yep.
They believe it very strongly, and so, you know, 6 months ago or 6 weeks ago, they had a brilliant concept. And, you know, I've had meetings with the vice president of Expedia, if you can believe I even got in the same room with that person, and said, please stop searching by airports and towns. Search by concept. Search by category. How about adventure? How about, you know, different? Our software doesn't work that way. I had the same conversation with Travelocity. Well, Yonder wants to talk about experiences. They want to help you find the right nature-based experience for yourself. And whether it's in Colorado or Arizona is not the point. The point is, what do you want? Let's help you get there, and we'll figure it out. And we're not going to tie you down to the Denver airport or the Tucson area. And so nature, different search style, experience-based, nature-based. They're going all around the world. They've involved people like myself and Colleen in helping them find their way through this. They're well-funded. They're well thought out, and I would tell every dude ranch in America, and every farm stay, and every escape, and every vineyard that takes guests, get on Yonder now, because I can't imagine there's a hospitality business in America that is doing well right now. I don't care who you are, and they are a real glimmer of hope for the future, particularly with whatever after effects may come of this, you know, fear of transmission of this virus. And
absolutely.
So, I mean, you know, that's not their genius. They have a lot of genius in them. But they of course didn't see that the COVID-19 was going to send people scurrying out into nature. But there is an argument that if there's money to spend and people who are willing to spend it, they're going to be looking for these types of vacations, and Yonder is uniquely placed to help them find us.
Yeah, it really sounds like Yonder is definitely going to be doing something special. And full disclosure for everyone listening, Ranch Bookings is a preferred partner for Yonder. We're going to be working here over the next coming months to make sure all of our Ranch Bookings customers, if they want to be, are listed on Yonder. So for anybody listening, if you want to work with Yonder, you can reach out to them. You can reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you about that. And then one more time for anybody who's listening, as Russell talked about for PR, Ranch Bookings, this Adventure Story series is an opportunity for PR for your ranch. So if you're interested in being on, we'd love to interview. Please just send me an email, give me a call, and we can set something up. Russell, I apologize for cutting you off there. I appreciate you letting me get in that little pitch in there to try to get more people on for these interviews.
Well, it's your show, and I talk too much.
No, I loved it. No, that was perfect. The more you talk, the less I talk, and the happier people are listening. Mm-hmm. So we are now here up on our hour, so I'm happy to keep this rolling, but I don't have any more written questions for you down right now. I would like to say thank you for taking your time to do this. I know you're incredibly busy. You have your young kiddo at home, a number of things going on, so you're just being generous with your time and your advice. So thank you from both Matt and I and everybody who's listening. And at the end of this, as we kind of say goodbye, if you have any advice, any words of encouragement, or anything you'd like to say for the ranches listening, please, now's your time. Please say or put out whatever message you'd like.
Well, I don't really presume to have advice for dude ranches. I mean, I listen to a lot of people and read the emails back and forth, and I think that dude ranches are trying to figure out, particularly since the vast majority are about to enter their season. You know, this hit right in our peak season and wiped out 90% of it, and so it's really hard for these people, meaning Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, etc., to evaluate what they're going to be able to do in the heat of in the height of their season, which is June, July, and August. And you know, I just see a lot of people being innovative in terms of how to operate their conventional, what I call internally conventional dude ranch business, which is a guest who pays for the entire experience. It's sort of an all-inclusive, generally minus liquor, and that's what we all want. That's what we all are geared up to operate with. And I think the other thing that we all have to do, and we're certainly doing here, is once we understand what the rules for operation will be, and believe me, once those rules are set, there are going to be a lot more scrutiny of that than there are right now, because they just presume most people are closed. So each state and each county and each jurisdiction will have their own rules. Obviously, we'll have to follow them. We may not agree with them. It's very likely I won't, but we'll have to follow them. But, you know, be also innovative in terms, I think we have to be innovative. Well, I'll say what we're doing. We're looking at our ranches, trying to figure out different ways to provide opportunity for guests to come here and fit what may be their budget, fit what may be their concerns, whether we agree with them or not, and you know, keep going forward. The internet allows us immediate flexibility. Take advantage of it is what we're planning to do. Once we have a sense of what, you know, we don't want to get ahead of it in action. We want to be ahead of it in thinking. That's what we're doing. Doesn't mean it's right.
All right. Thanks for joining us for Adventure Story number 5 with Russell True. We hope you enjoyed it. As always, if you're interested in learning more about ranch bookings or participating in one of our adventure stories, please give me a shout. My email is listed below. And that's it. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.